a little bit of a different segment here as we're going to play around with this throughout the season. Best win, worst loss
Yes.
of week 2. We're going to try and see if we can identify one of each of those for Mark and myself. So, Mark, let's start with best win, and I'll let
Okay.
you take the reins on that one.
A lot of great wins this week. For
Yeah, a
surprise
lot of
wins.
candidates.
A lot, a
Yeah.
lot of surprise wins. But I'm gonna trust what I think is a meaningful matchup for January football. And I think we saw one game that's going to mean a ton come January in the NFC, and that is the Bucks have the tiebreaker now over the Detroit Lions.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, I was high in the Bucks. I picked the Bucks to win their division. I picked the Lions to win that division. The fact that the Bucks went into Detroit, kind of punched them in the mouth, and handled the Lions' physicality, revenge game from the playoff loss last year. And listen, a really tough start of the year for the Lions, right? You get the Rams and the Bucks, two teams you beat in the playoffs. You see them immediately again to start your season. I'm not panicking if I'm the Lions. It's not the worst loss for the Lions, right? It's a really good Bucks team. But for the Bucks, I just thought that was an extremely important win. Baker played great. They forced the Lions to do what the Lions don't want to do, which is had Jared Goff throw the ball 55 times, right? The Lions want Jared Goff to throw the ball about 32 times and run the ball about 30 times. They weren't able to do that. And so credit to the Buccaneers. Listen, I mean, we are just a year and a 2 games into Baker Mayfield as a Buck. And I got to be honest, Dan, it is an extremely, extremely small sample size, but impressive sample size.
Yeah,
And
it's working. Something is working very well.
It's really working. Now, again, it feels a little bit like the Geno Smith talk. Like, how high is the ceiling? I don't know. But I do
But
know that
even Baker feels differently because you feel that the whole team's vibe is around him. I don't
yes,
know if like Seattle's like,
yeah,
obviously Geno's a good teammate and like they like him there, but it just
yeah.
feels more of a spark, right, with
Totally.
Baker.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I mean, listen, we just saw Brock Purdy lead the Niners to a Super Bowl. Is the Bucks roster as good as the Niners? No, but is Baker better than Purdy? I think so. So maybe that equals
Yeah.
out, right? Maybe that equals out. And also, one thing I wanted to do this week with you is to do a segment called Contract Checkup. So this game has one of my contract checkups. So what I did was there are 7 quarterbacks who signed big deals this offseason. Baker Mayfield was one of them. 3 years, $100 million, 33.3333 per year. Through 2 games, 2-0, 73.5% completion percentage, 474 yards passing. So he's averaging what? 200 and almost 240 yards a game, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 1 rushing TD. That was a really nice rushing touchdown for him.
Yeah.
A+ on the contract, right? That's my gut. That's
No
my
doubt.
feeling.
No doubt. You'll take that all day in the NFL, especially today's NFL. We see the quarterbacks. I mean, who'd you rather have, Dak Prescott or Baker Mayfield? I feel like they're, 1A, 1B.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
They're
And if
very, very close.
and the number is you're paying Baker half per season, and overall the lifetime of the contract, you're paying him almost 2.5. What 1?
Probably
I
like
don't do math.
35-40% of the overall Dak contract. I mean, it's
well, Dak's at 240 million over 4 years. Baker's at 100 million.
Yeah.
So,
So it's right
140
around
million
40% of
less.
it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's wild stuff. I like that. I like that choice. For me, I'm going to also stay in the NFC. For me, it was the Minnesota Vikings defeating the San Francisco 49ers. So many. First off, nobody was talking about the Minnesota Vikings really throughout the offseason. I mean, we covered pretty much every team throughout the offseason on the show, but we definitely spent way less time on the Vikings than a lot of other teams. National media, no talk of Minnesota.
No.
And here they are, 2-0. Sam Darnold looking very competent with the Kevin O'Connell system. We had, discussed this as being a possibility. Was Sam Darnold going to have somewhat of a career resurrection with Kevin O'Connell? We thought the pairing was good. We thought, he's got the great weapon, but he's done this with, a banged up Justin Jefferson in this game. He did this without Jordan Addison. He did this without tight end 1 TJ Hawkinson so far through 2 weeks. A middling run game. I mean, Aaron Jones is good, but their offensive line, wasn't anything great to speak of. Their defense coming into the year, we're like, they're just going to be average at best. This is impressive, man. And to defeat
scary
defending, NFC champions, it says a lot about where Minnesota's at and where they see themselves this year. Even if they don't, make a run, if they're competitive by week 17, 18 of the season and putting themselves in a position for a playoff spot in the competitive NFC North, we're going to look back to the early season games where they defeated a tough 49ers team. Granted, it was at home, but went on the road week 1, got a win there too. I just think overall, what we're seeing from Sam Darnold, this is enough to sustain a pretty solid team throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great choice. It's truly one of the shocking results. I don't think it was shocking that the Vikings won, but I think it was shocking the way they won. I mean, Darnold late in the game making huge throws against that defense. And that was after he had already lost Justin Jefferson and there was no Jordan Addison in this game. He and Kevin O'Connell seem to be really simpatico and they're really on the same page. It's really early. It's a really small sample size, right? Remember what Kevin O'Connell did with Josh Dobbs for a game. We're like, oh my God, he's, and then it all fell apart. Yeah. Is it sustainable? I don't know. But I will say, if you're a Niners fan, are you sweating a little bit, right? No Purdy. I mean, no CMC. You just put Debo now injured.
Yep, and he's going to be missing a couple weeks at a minimum. So
yeah, and your offensive line has just not gelled. Purdy's been sacked. I think he got sacked like 6 or 7 times in that game against the Vikings defensive line that is not known, or at least on paper going into the season was not something we had to worry about, right?
I don't know who Pat Jones is. He had 2 sacks.
Exactly, right? I'll say this, Dan. My thought, there was a point in time during the third quarter of that game, as I'm watching it, I'm like, if I didn't know who Brock Purdy was and where he was drafted in his story, and I didn't know who Sam Darnold was in his story, you just took like a college scout, right, who maybe doesn't follow the NFL at all or doesn't care, right? And you said, hey, evaluate those 2 guys, Darnold versus Purdy. But dude, Darnold, that guy's a star. You should go pay him a ton of money. Purdy guy, you got to be questioning whether he's your guy or not. I mean, it was shocking on that field to be like Purdy, Darnold was the bigger, stronger athlete making the better throws, and Purdy looked shaken. And so huge win for Minnesota. I'm not panicking if I'm the Niners, but I think this is a wake-up call for them for sure that this start of the season, it could be really rough if they don't band together because of the injuries.
Yeah, 100%. It's early in the season, but there's obviously some warning signs here of fatigue and wear and tear and being old that, maybe it's caught up with them a little bit in San Francisco. But as we know, Kyle Shanahan is one to pull some tricks out of the hat and work his magic with Jawan Jennings and Jordan Mason here and a lot of other, lesser known players. So we'll see if they can turn it around. Worst loss of the week for me, Mark, is, and there were really 2 games that I was deciding between, but one was almost, just straight up expected at this point that I'm going to choose to not go with that one. I'm going to go with the matchup that we discussed last week as being super important for teams to get a win. The Jacksonville Jaguars losing 18.
It's my loss of the week as well. So we're on the same page there.
Good stuff.
It makes sense, right? Like we set it up last week, as you mentioned. Trevor Lawrence, contract checkup. You ready for contract checkup time? Checkup time.
Let's do it.
Trevor Lawrence.
Just signed. The ink is still drying.
5 years. $275 million. He's the only one of the big contracts that got 5 years. Remember, I was shocked that Jordan Love didn't get 5 years, but he took 5 years, $55 million a year. He is now 0-2, completing 51% of his balls 382 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Dan, it's ugly. It doesn't look right. And I think the Jags have now lost like 7 straight games, or like a lot more. They lost 5 to end the season last year, and then 2 to start this year. It is ugly, ugly, ugly. And watching that game, listen, the Browns, Myles Garrett's a problem, but Trevor Lawrence is just missing throws. They don't do anything well on offense. Like, what's their identity? What do they lean on? I don't know what to say. They are in a must win. The problem is their next 2 games are the Bills and the Texans. So
yeah. So good luck with that, right?
I mean, this Jags team could be 0-4. And that is to me would be pretty shocking. I expected them to come out and have a really good year and bounce back year, and it has been anything but that so far.
It's been extremely disappointing there in Jacksonville. And here's something to kind of back it up too, because one of the biggest things, we talked about it last year, and I think it was last year where I was saying they were getting so much bad red zone luck that it almost had to revert back to the mean at some point this year. Now I feel like this is a legitimate pattern with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They cannot convert touchdowns in the red zone. They right now are 18th in the league. So, all right, they're middle of the road. It's not, fire burning at 42% this year. But it's just everything is so difficult with Jacksonville.
It's a great word.
That last year they were 21st in the league. Like that cannot cut it in terms of
with those
converting red zone trips to touchdowns
and that quarterback
with that amount of weapons, and with a Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson, with a talent at quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. It's the most perplexing thing I can think in the league over the last couple of years is their lack of success.
Yeah,
because the talent is still there. I will die on that hill with Trevor Lawrence having all of the tools to be able to make it work. I don't get why it's not.
No, and he's going to get the benefit of the doubt to get another head coach, right? Like if this year continues to spiral because of the giant contract. But in a year from now, with a new head coach, if that's where it goes and it's still not getting better, that's when we legitimately, there's no other question just to be like, maybe he just doesn't have it. He just doesn't have it. It's bad. It's still early, plenty of time to turn around, but you're right. It was the worst loss. The Browns were as low as it could get. The game was in Jacksonville, I believe, and they couldn't find a way to win. They couldn't score. Deshaun Watson only rushed a touchdown. It's not like he turned it around and lit it up and then, they just couldn't hang with him. It was ugly. It was bad. And it is definitely the worst loss, mainly to me, compounded by the fact that you have the Bills and the Texans next. 2 of the 3 top 3 teams in the AFC. You've got to go turn your season around and try to they've got to win at least one of those. They've got to be 1-3 by week 4. So good luck to them. And, you hope it's the Texans because it's a divisional game, right? But not a great spot for the Jags.
Definitely not a great spot. Hopefully brighter days ahead for Jacksonville, as well as for that fan base who has been clamoring for a team that has a semblance of, offensive and defensive cohesion for an entire season to get them over that hump that they've been waiting for so long. All right.